All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
In the heart of the night, where the shadows play, on the X Zone we gather, come what may, with Rob McConnell guiding us through the dark, searching for truth hidden, igniting the spark. Whispers of spirits, both gentle and bold, tales of the ancients in the stories retold, from haunted old houses to the echoing halls, we seek the unknown where mystery calls. On the X-Zone Radio, where the truth finds a way through the stories of ghosts that wander and sway, inviting the seekers, the wise and the brave. Join us each episode, let the curious say.
And welcome back, everyone. This is the X Zone. I'm Rob McConnell, coming to you from our broadcast center and studios in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada, on the CanCon Broadcast Network, and on your hometown radio, Classic 1220 CFAJ AM, who stream us at classic1220.ca. And in fact, they're just down the street from us on Lake, right in front of beautiful Montebello Park. Speaking about St. Catharines, as many of you know, here in St. Catharines, we've suffered flooding because of the horrific amount of rain that we've gotten. Several hundred homes and families have been disrupted, and I would just like to say thank you to all the volunteers who have come to the Niagara region to help us out. I'd like to thank the off-duty police officers, the off-duty firefighters, the off-duty members of the paramedics here in Niagara, as well as members of the Canadian Armed Forces and the veterans of the Canadian Armed Forces who have come down to help us. So from everyone here at the X Zone, and I know from listeners throughout the Niagara region, to each and every one of you, thank you for coming to our aid and for really showing us what friendship and neighborhood community is all about. Exonation, for centuries, people have reported seeing apparitions, encountering poltergeists, and receiving messages that seem to come from beyond the grave. But can these extraordinary experiences be investigated scientifically? And might they provide evidence that human consciousness survives physical death? Well, my guest tonight is one of the world's most respected authorities on parapsychology and paranormal investigation. LOYD AUERBACH has over 45 years of experience investigating paranormal phenomenon and over 40 years of experience teaching parapsychology. LOYD is the director of the Office of Paranormal Investigations, president of the Forever Family Foundation, and adjunct professor at Atlantic University and president of the board of directors of the Ryan Research Center. LOYD is also the author or co-author of 9 nonfiction books, including A Paranormal Casebook, Psychic Dreaming, ESP Wars, East and West, and the classic ESP Hauntings and Poltergeist, A Parapsychologist's Handbook. His expertise has brought him into thousands of contacts with members of the media appearances, including the television series The Unexplained and Netflix Surviving Death. As it weren't enough, he is also a professional mentalist, performing as Professor Paranormal and a professional chocolatier. Well, what exactly is a ghost? How should paranormal claims be investigated? And after more than 4 decades in the field, has LOYD uncovered convincing evidence that something of us continues after death? His website is LOYDAuerbach.com. That's LOYD AUERBACH.com. Joining me now is parapsychologist and paranormal investigator Lloyd Auerbach. And Lloyd, welcome back to the X Zone.
Thank you, Rob.
Lloyd, you've spent more than 45 years investigating paranormal phenomena. What first drew you to parapsychology?
Well, actually, it was the idea that human beings were potentially more than we thought we are. And that goes back to being a kid, reading comic books, science fiction, and eventually finding, when I was probably about 12 or 13, the science books about parapsychology in the library. That really gave me the background that there was a science to studying psychic phenomena in general, and continued that through high school until I lucked out when there was a graduate parapsychology program at the time.
Yeah, when you entered the field, Lloyd, did you already believe in paranormal phenomena, or were you just primarily looking for answers?
A little of both, but I did. I had read a lot in parapsychology in high school and even before that. So I read quite a bit of information, all sorts of accounts that people had. I also was very fortunate because I did discover the books on the more research-oriented work in parapsychology, and got to meet a couple of New York area parapsychologists who I later continued to connect with once I got into the field. And that was through a neighbor of mine one of the folks, Montague Ullman, who was one of the authors of the Dream Telepathy study at Maimonides Medical Center back in the 70s. He lived about a mile and a half from me, and one of my neighbors was his yoga teacher. So I was very, very lucky to spend some time with him, with Gertrude Schmeidler, and then eventually talking to other parapsychologists. So it was really the evidence that I saw. It was the research that was there. It was the accounts that really did have a pattern. It was kind of the history of all that convinced me that there was a lot of reality to all of this.
What exactly is parapsychology, and how does it differ from what people commonly call ghost hunting?
Well, parapsychology is the study of psychic phenomena, which, unlike what the TV shows seem to think, does include the idea of apparitions or ghosts and hauntings and poltergeist phenomena. That's all psychic phenomena. But we also, of course, mainly in the laboratory, we study psychokinesis to some extent. That's mind over matter. And there's a lot of variations of that, and all sorts of variations of extrasensory perception, which is perception without the normal senses. So it's not really a sixth sense. It's really about getting information without any of those physical senses that we normally have. And yeah.
After the thousands of investigations and media appearances that you've done, do you consider yourself a believer, a skeptic, or something in between?
So I would call myself, or I typically call myself, a skeptical believer in that I do believe in the phenomena. There is more than enough evidence for it, for people's abilities, for human beings to be able to sense these things, perceive these things. But when I go out on an investigation, our primary, and this is the difference between what you see on TV with the ghost hunting stuff. Ghost hunting is more of a down-to-earth name for field investigations of this phenomena. We look for normal explanations first for every element that's been reported. And we try to eliminate all the possible normal explanations, psychological explanations, environmental explanations, and then we try to work with what's left with that. So every case I get, I'm skeptical in the truest sense. I'm a doubter, not a disbeliever. Because unfortunately, the word skeptic has gotten a negative connotation thanks to the organized skeptics out there.
What qualities, in your opinion, separate a properly trained paranormal investigator from an enthusiastic amateur with a bunch of whiz-bang equipment?
Gizmos?
Yeah, gizmos.
Well, first of all, some either whether you do it on your own or through courses like the ones we offer through the Rhine Education Center, learning something about the field of parapsychology. I have met way too many ghost hunters who had no clue that there's over 140 years of history to this, including ghost hunting, and had no idea that there was literature out there. Had no idea that researchers. Yeah, I mean, even one of the TV personalities in 2008, we were on a panel at a convention in Pennsylvania, and we were each speaking about how the media looks at this. And he got up there and said that there was no literature before the 1990s.
You got to be
This is
kidding.
one of the main stars of one of the major TV shows who claimed to have been doing investigations for 30 years. So I was very rude. I interrupted him and corrected him on that.
I don't think that was being rude. I just think that was being the very knowledgeable professional that you are, and you were just giving the wannabe a little bit of a lesson. That's all.
Yeah, I think so. But I think the audience were mainly fans of the shows.
Oh,
they were not happy with me.
The truth has a habit of doing that, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
When you arrive at an allegedly haunted location, Lloyd, what are the first things you examine?
Well, number one of the things that we must do is talk to witnesses. So if it's a residence, we talk to everybody in the home. And in fact, we've done pre-interviewing with people before we even go, because there has to be some indication that the phenomena that they're experiencing is likely to still be happening. If it's something that they had an experience with a year ago in the home, but nothing has happened, it's more, we'll take the information over the phone or on Zoom, and I'll say, okay, call me or let me know when something happens again, because it's kind of like a cold case.
Yeah.
There's nothing you can investigate there at that point. When we go in, I have in the pre-interview and then in the interview process, we try to find out every little thing that they think is paranormal, that they think is part of this activity that they had. And we would walk around the house with them after the initial interview in the home, try to look for an alternative explanation for each of the events that they are reporting, and looking for patterns between those events that don't seem to have an explanation, as well as the people's experiences that are there. We do use environmental sensors, which unfortunately got co-opted by the TV shows to be the gizmos that supposedly detect ghosts, even though none of them do. We use them for environmental reasons because we're trying to see, for the most part, whether there's something unusual when people have an experience versus when they don't. Is there a change in the environment that might account for or be connected to the experience?
Lloyd, you and I have to take our first break, so please stand by. And Exo Nation, our guest this hour is one of the original, but one of the most professional researchers when it comes to parapsychology and the investigation of the paranormal that I've had the pleasure of knowing over the number of years that I've been doing this show. Lloyd Auerbach is his name, and his website is www.LOYDAuerbach.com. Lloyd and I will be back on the other side of this break, and all the music in this hour is done by our good friends at rammusic.ca.
Of the ancients in the stories retold, from haunted old houses to the echoing halls, we seek the unknown where mystery calls. On the Exo Radio, where the truth finds a way through the stories of ghosts that wander and sway, inviting the seekers, the wise and the brave. Join us each episode, let the curious say, with voices like Larry and Paul at the helm.
Shuffle the deck in the candlelight, whispers dancing through the night. 78 windows, secrets unfold, stories of fire, water, air, and gold. The fool takes a step where the road is unknown. The magician says you're never alone. The high priestess smiles with a mystery deep, guarding the truth that the shadows keep. Cards on the table, fate in the air, turning the symbols, finding what's there. Past, present, future, it's to the soul in the heart, cards on the table, lanterns that glow, showing the path where the brave spirits go.
Lloyd Auerbach is my special guest this hour, Exonation. His website is LOYDauerbach.com. Lloyd, how much paranormal activity can ultimately be explained by environmental conditions, human perception, or simple, ordinary events?
Well, I'd say that in any given case that seems like it's legitimate, the majority of those cases have probably 50 to 70% that is explainable. That's for a case where we've determined that something actually paranormal is happening. What happens is somebody has an experience, or people have an experience, and often that freaks them out a bit. And so now they're on edge, and they somehow, they misperceive, they mislabel things that they never noticed before in the home, or even something as simple as somebody in the house knocks something off a shelf. If the person, if somebody else didn't see that happen, they might label that as paranormal. I think even from the case calls that we get, there's a percentage. We try to filter as much as possible for those, but I've gotten cases that were explainable even over the phone for that.
How many cases a year would you and your team receive calls about?
Well, these days, I have to be real honest here and transparent. For the last few years, it's been going down lower and lower and lower, and
Really?
I hardly ever get a case. Certainly not one locally. I probably get emails about potential cases, I don't know, anywhere between 5 and 20 per year, and I try to find other folks around the country because they're almost never here in the Bay Area for me to go to.
Why do you think that is, Lloyd?
Well, honestly, it is because there's low-hanging fruit. There's thousands of ghost hunting groups out there, and many of them have very pretty websites and make a lot of promises. So people contact whoever's local. And some of the calls that I've gotten over the years, from anywhere in the country, have been because they had the local ghost hunting group in. I'll give you an example. I had one a couple of years ago where a couple were having some weird sensations, and they saw a figure in the house. They called the local ghost hunters. Local ghost hunters came in. They sent them to a hotel because the ghost hunters wanted to be alone in the house with their equipment and do EVP. And about 4 o'clock in the morning, the guy got a call from the leader of that ghost hunting team saying, "We've left the house. You have a demon here."
Oh, boy.
Because they got what sounded like a growl on the EVP. That's the only thing that happened. The couple, fortunately, never believed it was dangerous or evil or anything like that. So they weren't traumatized by that statement. But the guy was like, telling me, he said, "So what is wrong with those people?" is what he said to me. And I said, exactly. What is wrong with those people? But that's actually one of the main reasons we don't get many calls. The Rhine Center does get calls once in a while, and we do kind of send those cases out where we can. But, it's not like we're well funded to travel around the country to do any of this.
When it comes to the investigation of potentially paranormal activity in a home, a lot of paranormal, I can't call them researchers because they're not. I can't call them ghost investigators because they're not. I'm just going to say those folks. Those folk always rely on the EVPs that they gather as proof of a paranormal activity. I've been in the broadcast business, when reel-to-reel tapes were still in use. Mm-hmm. And then we went to the carts, the electric, the magnetic media. So I've got a fair idea on how audio works. And I could never understand the premise of the actual working of an EVP. To me, it makes no sense. To me, I've heard EVPs that people can say, "Did you hear it?" And I said, "Hear what?" "Oh, come on, Rob, listen again."
Mm-hmm. It's audio pareidolia, audio matrixing. Here's the thing. There is some legitimate research on electronic voice phenomena. There are some really interesting under control conditions, actual voices that are understandable. that have shown up, even certainly way back with reel to reel and other situations. In fact, sometimes the tape was not even out of the package, and when they played it back, just to check it to make sure they actually got voices on things, and
Right.
especially if they've asked for that. How that could possibly happen with spirits or with living people, by the way, because
Right.
we have a lot of evidence that living people can affect things unconsciously,
Mm-hmm.
is psychokinesis, mind over matter, affecting the tape, affecting the device, the recording device, all of that. But the majority of the EVP stuff that they're doing, they really want to get something. And so the slightest murmur, the slightest weird sound, any of that seems to be interpreted by the listeners in certain ways. And there was actually a study a few years ago where one of my colleagues had some EVP stuff, and he played it for people. He did two things. He told them what it said and played it for them, and it was garbled. It wasn't very clear anything. And about 85% of them, because he said listen for the hello or whatever the message was, and they heard it. 85% of the people did. Did it again, but this time didn't tell them what it said, and only about 15% got anything out of it.
Is it possible, Lloyd, that EVPs are actually thought transference?
It's possible that it is the operator, because I've met people from ghost hunting groups who claim that they have one person in the group who always gets good EVPs.
Mm-hmm.
It is possible that individual desires those EVPs so strongly that their unconscious mind affect the audio. It's also possible that when these groups get together and don't say what it sounds like, that maybe there is a little telepathy going on because one person has determined that it says, "Hi, Chris," and everybody else seems to hear that in some way, some suggestion in some way. And then there are things like, people subvocalize, just murmuring. There's the stomach rumbling, which sounds like growling and things, and people have literally called that demons. I had somebody play a growl for me and said, "It's a demon's voice." I said, "How do you know it's not a dead dog spirit?" And when I said that, the guy looked at me like, I guess we never thought of that.
Oh my gosh!
I mean, you got to have a little sense of humor here too.
You sure do. You sure do.
I usually send people. All my students see this for all my classes. There was a skit on Saturday Night Live years ago with Hugh Laurie, where they kind of spoofed Most Haunted, that TV show.
Yeah.
And it's literally one of the funniest things Saturday Night Live has done. You can just go to YouTube and put in SNL Most Haunted. It really encapsulates what's wrong with ghost hunting and the equipment and the EVP stuff.
SNL Most Haunted.
You should definitely watch it.
I intend to.
I've seen it hundreds of times. It still makes me laugh.
For the listeners who are just tuning in, because Lloyd, since you were with us last time, we've gotten a number of great new affiliates around the world.
Mm-hmm.
Would you be able to tell them what the difference between an apparition is, a haunting, and a poltergeist?
Sure. The way we look at them in parapsychology, first of all, the term apparition has been used for a very long time. We prefer that to ghosts, but I think most people think of a ghost as somebody after death who's kind of hanging around. And so that's what an apparition is. We use the term apparition when people get a sense or perceive in some way someone whose consciousness is still around after they have died, but generally has not moved on to whatever the next level of consciousness is for that. So that would be the true, discarnate entities, true dead people, you might say. They can be seen by some people. This is all a psychic thing. This is the one thing that's missing from the ghost hunting world that they have to understand, that for someone to perceive a ghost, you have a little psychic ability without realizing it. Your perception is picking up that consciousness. Hauntings, or what ghost hunters like to use, and it's a decent term, residual hauntings, is the idea that information is in the environment and that we are capable of picking up information about past events, either psychically or perhaps even through some connection with the environment that our brains make. We're still trying to figure out the physical mechanism of how that information is held. Typically, it's highly emotional ones or the things that people pick up. But I will say that hauntings have nothing to do with dead people any more than watching a movie from the 1930s is dead people. Because you have to be alive to make that movie, even though 50 years or 100 years later, you're no longer alive. That recording is still available. And so residual hauntings are basically recordings of past events, including of living people, still living people.
Why do I'm
yeah.
sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to jump to poltergeist next.
Okay, great.
So poltergeist, interestingly enough, a few years ago in a communication I had with a very famous investigator, Guy Lyon Playfair in the UK, we discovered that they don't exactly use the term poltergeist in the UK the way we use it in North America. We use it to describe cases of purely physical phenomena. Almost never do you have any apparitions seen or perceived. Mm-hmm. It's all physical. And that ties back to a living individual in the location, in the household or workplace. That person's unconscious frustrations or other psychology, for the most part, it's their psychology, that is blowing off steam in that telekinetic temper tantrum. Some of the poltergeist agents actually, about 30% in a few surveys, have shown actually to have neurological issues, often epilepsy or epileptic-like activity in the temporal lobes. And it's almost like that poltergeist activity is the seizure, that it's going outward instead of inward in some respects. In the UK, they use the term to describe any case with physical activity, even if an apparition is seen, and then they split it out to living people and dead people, pretty much.
Fascinating. Lloyd, please stand by. We've got to take our break at the bottom of the hour. And Exonation, if you'd like to find out more about our guest this hour, please visit his website, LOYD.Our This is the X Zone. I'm Rob McConnell, and as you know, this is a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard, Monday through Friday from 10 p.m. Eastern until midnight, right here on the CanCom Broadcast Network and your hometown radio, Classic 1220, who not only broadcast us through southern Ontario and the northern tiers of the U.S., that border Lake Erie and Lake Ontario, but they also stream us around the world on classic1220.ca.
Windows, secrets unfold, stories of fire, water, air, and gold. The fool takes a step where the road is unknown. The magician says you're never alone. The high priestess smiles with a mystery deep, guarding the truth that the shadows keep. Cards on the table fading.
Since 1990, through the dark of the night, one paper kept searching for the truth in the light, where others stayed silent, afraid of what they'd find. The X-Chronicles opened up the paranormal mind, from UFO sightings crossing midnight skies to alien encounters and government lies. Ghosts in the shadows, whispers from the dead, ancient gods and mysteries still left unread. The truth is out there, calling through the night, in the pages of the X-Chronicles, shining bright. From hauntings to disclosure, from science to the strange, exploring worlds and mysteries beyond the human range. The X-Chronicles newspaper.
And welcome back. Lloyd Auerbach is our guest, LOYD.Our. Lloyd, what about these ghosts that just seem to be hanging around these places, that these ghost hunters keep on going time after time after time after time after time after time, like Waverly Hills, for example?
Yeah, most likely, if there was anything at Waverly Hills at all, I'd probably guess it was hauntings, so the residual stuff, because um, it's like Alcatraz here in the Bay Area. People seem to think there's lots of ghosts in Alcatraz, when in fact, unless it was the ghosts of the guards, all those prisoners wanted to get away from Alcatraz.
Yeah.
So the reason for them to stay would make no sense whatsoever. And there's residual stuff, and other imprints and things like that people pick up on, but there's no actual spirits there. And I tend to think that's the case with a lot of these places, like Waverly Hills, where there's actually, emotion and the stuff that's been imprinted in the environment, people do feel. So yes, you think it's spirits, but it's not really spirits. It's the other stuff. The thing about all of these tourist places, first of all, I want to say that it is great that many of there were museums and historical locations that without the ghost hunting tourism, they would have closed. So I think that's been a really good positive for them. On the other hand, there's all sorts of wild claims that go out there that the ghost hunters actually add folklore to what's been going on. Most of those places had no witnesses. In other words, there was nobody who had an experience.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it's got folklore around it. It's a sanitarium, so it must be haunted. It's a hospital terminal ward in an abandoned hospital. It must be haunted. There's no must there. It doesn't have to be haunted. There don't have to be any spirits there at all.
Do we find the same thing when it comes to graveyards?
Graveyards aren't. I mean, I'd say that graveyards, if anything's at graveyards, it's the emotions that the mourners have left behind. It's not about spirits.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. If you were dead, would you hang around a cemetery?
Hell no.
No, yeah. I mean, you go to bars and restaurants, which is why bars and restaurants are often haunted.
Now, is a ghost necessarily the surviving consciousness of a deceased person, or could it be something else entirely?
Well, generally, when people perceive apparitions and even communicate with them, they're getting they see the person or they pick up on this person, and there's a sense of it being a human being, a consciousness of a human being. But it's possible that, I know that people, when they sometimes see a figure in a residual haunting case, that imprint, they immediately assume it's an actual spirit. Even some psychics don't know the difference between conscious and not conscious. But for the most part, when we look at the cases, we try to get the information, whether it's through witnesses or bringing in psychics and mediums, to try to determine who that person actually is. And frankly, the vast majority of initial or one-time ghost experiences are people perceiving a loved one or a good friend who has just died, or even at the moment of death, for maybe some days after. And then that person goes away. Whether that was them saying goodbye or it's a part of their consciousness, we don't know what consciousness actually is, or even if consciousness is in the body, let alone generated by the body. So there's a lot of questions about that to begin with.
Of the cases that you've investigated over the years, Lloyd, is there one that still puzzles you because no conventional explanation adequately accounts for what happened?
Well, I can't say puzzles me, because maybe we have unconventional explanations, but we still have explanations for these cases. I've had a couple of cases which didn't have enough information for me to determine if it was a conscious entity or a residual haunting. I will say that, because sometimes you don't have possibility of exploring that based on the witness testimony and the lack of current activity, for that matter. But I've had many cases over the years where I would say that the conventional explanations don't fit. So we have our explanation that consciousness is still present, because there's interaction between the figures and people. Cases that have been going on for years, sometimes decades, and enough of a through line of the experiences and the information they've gotten from these folks, the dead people, that seems to support consciousness surviving death. So again, unconventional explanation, but an explanation nonetheless.
We talked briefly about the sounds that some investigators get as EVPs that they claim are demons. Are demons real?
not from any scientific perspective or even historical perspective in general. If we're talking about the religious, the fallen angels kinds of things, that's religious mythology, and there's mythology around the world of evil entities, but that makes sense given human beings, that there's good and evil in general in the world. But there's really not evidence that these are demonic, as in from Satan and things like that. And personally, I don't believe in them. I wasn't brought up that way, in the light Judaism that I went through. And there's not really good evidence for that. And there's not even good evidence that there's too many evil spirits out there in general.
Have you ever personally witnessed an apparition, Lloyd, or a paranormal event that changed your understanding of reality?
Well, I won't say that in the case that changed my perspective on apparitions, from maybe to, oh, absolutely. I had a case back in early 1985. I didn't experience anything. I didn't have a psychic with me. I had a couple other people, but we did extensive interviews with the family, and their 12-year-old son was having daily communication with the spirit of the woman who had grown up in the house and had died in the hospital about a year and a half before they even got the house in an estate sale. The boy was able to give so much detail about the woman's past that when I tracked down her only living relative, I hit him with those stories. And actually, the majority of the stories, when I would start the story, he would finish it. He was 92 at that point.
Wow.
Also had information about that this kid would have had to dig through. He would never have found this in a library, the information about how a ghost is appearing to him. He knew it was psychic. He knew it was not visual with his eyes. He saw her at different ages in different clothes. And the response when I said, well, how come that is? And apparently the ghost told him while we're sitting there, because that's how she feels that day. And that's something that's come up in other cases as well. The apparitions changing their clothing and even traveling. They're not stuck in a single location. But that one case, there was so much detail that I couldn't really conclude anything else, especially when I asked if there's anything she wanted to know from myself and the other two. And the questions that this kid is listening, and he asked each of us a question that related not at all to the case, but directly to the conversation that we had in the 40-minute drive from the university down to this house.
Holy cow.
And the only way he could have known this is if the family had bugged my car, but there was no motivation for that. Unless the kid was really, really psychic. And there was no other indication other than what he said about the ghosts. He said, this is 85. She did not trust us to not have blasters or proton packs because of Ghostbusters. So she got to the university somehow, got in my car, and listened in our conversation as we drove down to the house. That was what we were told.
Wow.
So that kind of case, absolutely convinced me. And then over time, one of my longtime cases, I've been walked through multiple times. So had an experience that was not visual at all, but definitely sensation related.
What did it feel like?
She's a very giggly ghost, and it felt very happy and giggly, actually.
How do we explain that? Or how do you explain that as a parapsychologist?
Well, consciousness without a body,
Mm-hmm.
People die, they don't have a body, connecting with us psychically, mind to mind. And for some of us, I don't apparently process psychic information very visually. So the intention of her to walk through or move through me back and forth was something I picked up on. And that was a psychic impression, but, I felt it in my body. And interestingly enough, because I'm the scientist, I started timing it. And 2.5 minutes later, around the corner came the 3 psychics that we were working with in this location overnight with permission of the owner. And they all stopped and looked over there, and one of them said, "Oh, Lloyd, she's walking 3, isn't she?" And they all burst out laughing, and I separate the 3 of them. I asked them to describe what they saw. It actually matched what she was wearing. The descriptions matched each other. But also during the process, I got this mental image, even though it wasn't my eyes. But in my mind, I had a visualization of this young woman giggling and walking back and forth through me, like it was a fun thing to do. and I had a picture in my head, and it matched what they said.
Is it all? No, let me rephrase that. When you or I pass away, will we have the same ability to, let's say, walk through somebody or communicate with them through psychic abilities? Or is it something very special that happens either at the time of death or during the person's life that allows them to live on after a physical death?
Well, we tend to think, many of us tend to think, because there's two stages here. There's you die and perhaps you stick around for a while or for a long while. There seem to be probably some environmental conditions that allow that to happen. Otherwise, we'd have a lot more apparitions around.
Yeah.
But there's also a psychological factor that the people who, when the mediums or psychics or even the witnesses interview the ghost or ask why you're here, sometimes it's because they claim to not know they're dead. Although I think that's just simply denial. But often it's to look over the family, to watch over the family because the family's grieving,
Right.
Or it's because they're going to miss things about the real world, or because they're afraid of what's next. They're afraid there's a heaven or hell. They don't know where they're going. Sometimes they claim not to know what to do next. But the majority of people move on to the other side or the other level of existence that mediums communicate with.
Lloyd, stand by. You and I have to take our final break. As always, Lloyd, great having you with us and helping to put a better understanding the difference between what's on TV as entertainment and what is as fact. As a parapsychologist, a professional investigator, and of course, a scientist. We'll be back. Don't go away.
Past midnight on Yates Street, the signal hums low. Static's alive and the shadows glow. Through the glass of the control room door, something whispers, we've been here before. Old footsteps echo the real size. The red on air, light flickers and dies. Through the hallway, a chill creeps deep. CKTB never sleeps. Ghosts on Yates Street.
Lloyd Auerbach is our guest. And again, Lloyd, thanks very much for joining us. One of the questions that I get asked a lot by people who, when I'm not doing the show, is, Rob, what are orbs? Are they really spirits? And I say, well, what I believe they are is dust or bugs or moisture in the air.
Mm-hmm. And you're right.
Yeah, but Rob, I really thought that one was my uncle. Well, unless your uncle's a drip, man.
Yeah, here's the problem. Nobody thought orbs, these orbs in photos, by the way, not because you don't see them photos or video. The association with those blobby circular things on film and otherwise goes back to the mid-1990s. It actually goes back to when flashes got more powerful and the inception of a group called the International Ghost Hunter Society. And it was a guy named Dave Oster from the International Ghost Hunter Society who made orbs equal spirits.
Wasn't his wife's name Sharon?
Sharon Gill, right. Yeah. He was the one who promoted this idea. And it's a very illogical connection. It was because he was going to haunted places and would take pictures, and they get these orby things on the film, on the pictures. That's the only connection whatsoever. And there was an assumption that because they happen in haunted places, but he never went to places that weren't haunted and got orbs because he never tried. And you easily could. So, and besides when it's dust and bugs, it's because the flash is reflecting off those things close enough to the lens to cause that impact on the film or the digital media. And then on video, yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I remember as a kid sitting in the sunbeams and watching the dust particles.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
Why?
It's crazy, but because so many people could get those because the flashes were more powerful. Mm-hmm. Also, if the flash reflected off of even a semi-reflective surface outside the frame of the film, but it reflected back at the camera, you got really cool orbs.
Sounds a lot like the UFO community.
Yeah, I mean, the fact is that UFO folks who are real scientists there have analyzed photographs to a point where they can tell if it's photographic, they can tell if it's something, right? That was bigger than a bread box, so to speak. But you really can't always determine what the source of the orb is. I had a friend of mine he's a investigator. He's also a videographer and photographer. And at one point I challenged him to come up with every possible accidental on purpose getting an orb. And he sent me like a stack of, 50 or 60 photographs.
Why is it the wackiest things live on within the paranormal community? And I'm not talking about your side of the paranormal community. Mm-hmm. I mean the other side, the ones who really want to believe that everything they see on TV is real.
Well, as somebody who grew up in the TV industry and had an uncle who was a soap opera director for decades, there are people who believe the actors on the soap operas were the character. So there's a segment of the population that doesn't discern or doesn't understand that reality TV is not real. Just because it's unscripted, it's still manipulated. Whether it's in the edit room or actually on site, it's manipulated. It's not real in many respects. It's not a documentary, and even documentaries have biases too.
Yeah, that's true.
But there are people, I understand people want to believe and they want evidence and they want proof and all of that. I actually don't think a lot of ghost hunters want the ultimate, the real, they don't want to they want to gather evidence and talk about it. That's the experience they have. They're not trying to figure out what's actually happening or to support things.
But their method of investigation and gathering evidence works against them.
It's created by TV producers. It has very little to do with science whatsoever. Mm-hmm. There's also this idea that if I'm using a technological device, then I must be doing science. And that's not the case. Otherwise, everybody using a microwave would be doing science.
You've never tasted my wife's cooking.
It's just a really interesting thing. But with the orb stuff and the equipment that came out, what it did, and this is partly because of the TV shows, the average person didn't need any understanding or background at all other than what they see on TV to capture so-called evidence. So it basically made it possible for people to mimic what they saw on TV, including getting the readings, the pictures, all that stuff they see on TV that are labeled as paranormal. And it's just that they don't question things is a problem. We have a certain segment the people that I've met from the paranormal community who actually got bored with that and sought out education in parapsychology, which is why we have an education center for the Rhine Research Center.
Tell us a little bit more about the Rhine Research Center, and do you have any events that are coming up?
So the Rhine Center itself is the legacy of the old Duke Parapsychology Laboratory, which was started in 1935 by J.B. and Louisa Rhine and William McDougall. For decades, it's what people, when you heard the word ESP, you immediately said Duke University. And then the Rhines retired, they started a foundation, and eventually it became a research lab and educational foundation that was called the Rhine Research Center after they passed away. The Rhine is currently, since late last fall, is homeless in a sense. We lost our lease last fall, and the good news is we just bought a large space in a 3-story building, bought the entire top floor. So we actually now are starting to work on construction to rebuilding the labs and the library and all of that. And that should be open sometime late this fall as well.
And where's that going to be located?
It's in Durham, North Carolina, which is next to Duke University. The Ryan Education Center, the classes that we have, and I'm actually teaching 2 classes in August, and I'll be teaching some in the fall. They're all online. So we have students all over the country, in fact, all over the world from time to time. And there are live lectures, there's recorded stuff, there's all sorts of material. So people can always come into the classes. They can take them for credit. We actually have certificate programs, and it's parapsychology and some fun stuff that we also offer from time to time. The events coming up, I have one event coming up for the Forever Family Foundation.
I was just going to ask you about that.
Yeah, so that's an organization, a nonprofit, all volunteer, that tests and certifies evidential mediums, supports them in the family grieving process, and also education about research on the subject of life after death. And we're doing a psychic and mediumship development conference in Burbank, California in October, 24th and 25th. We still have space. I'm surprised, but we've sold out a lot of tickets. We're getting close to our capacity, and we're even trying to work with the hotel to expand the capacity. And if folks go to foreverfamilyfoundation.org and they go to the events page, you can click through to the actual event. If you are in California or want to come to California, we also have a Friday night evening dinner event with Laura Lynn Jackson, who's a very well-known and respected medium, and an additional medium, one of our other mediums as well. I'll be there. I'm going to be doing some psychic games and even performing as Professor Paranormal.
Wow. How did you ever come up with the idea for Professor Paranormal?
I don't know if you remember, but there was a group of comedians on radio, and one of their characters was Dr. Science. It was Duck's Breath Theater. And Dr. Science had these short blips where it'd be introduced as, I'm a doctor of science. And somebody said, well, Lloyd, you're a professor of the paranormal. And it stuck.
Love it. Love it. Got about 3 minutes left, Lloyd. One of the questions that I think you are the ultimate expert to answer is, what signs should people watch for when choosing a psychic or a medium?
Very good question. I'll tell you who not to go to.
Okay.
Right off the bat. First of all, if you're looking for somebody, word of mouth is one of the best ways to do it. If you know other people who have had a good experience, you want someone who doesn't make wild claims. No psychic can do everything. So that's one thing. I've see a lot of psychics making all sorts of claims. One of the claims they make is that they are 95% accurate. That is not a possible number. Number one, because psychic phenomena doesn't work that way. More importantly, that would mean they would track every statement they make, especially future statements about their clients' futures. And if a psychic predicts something for 5 years from now, they're not tracking any of that. Sometimes if you interview the psychic first, which you should always do, to see if you even like the person, do you want to even go to this person? Just a quick call or talk with them. If they say 95 or any percentage of accuracy, ask them how they calculate it. And when I've done that with people, it turns out that either they're just making it up because it sounds good, or they have that 95% of their clients come back again and again. And if it's the latter, that's customer satisfaction. I think that's a good thing. It's like a Yelp review in some respects. That's a good thing. But it's important to know that whatever psychic you go with intention. What is your intention to go? Entertainment or for help with a problem? And did you get something practical out of it? Or was it just entertaining?
Finally, Lloyd, where can our listeners find out more about you, your books, your courses, and of course, Ask Professor Paranormal program?
So basically, my website, which is LOYD.com, which you've mentioned, thank you. That has links to all of my books that are on Amazon and otherwise available. That also has a page. My social media is all listed there, which is my Ask Professor Paranormal YouTube channel. So I do a podcast every other Sunday. The next one I have coming up is August 23rd on Sunday evenings, and it's a straight Q&A. People can ask me any questions they want about the subjects that we talk about.
Great.
On YouTube. But again, getting there through my website. Also links to the Rhine Center, which is just simply Rhine, RHINE.org, and the Forever Family Foundation, as well as other organizations. In fact, there's a resources page there, which gives you links out to all sorts of online organizations in parapsychology. And there's a media page where this show will appear when you send me the link.
Lloyd, take care of yourself. Thank you once again for coming on the show. Always a great pleasure. Continued success, and I look forward to the next time you and I meet back here in the X Zone. Take care, my friend.
Thank you, Rob.
And I'll be back tomorrow night at 10 o'clock as once again we cross the time-space continuum to this place that I call the X Zone. So from everyone here at the CanCom Broadcast Network and your hometown radio, Classic 1220 CFAJ AM, always remember to keep your eyes to the sky and your heart in the light. Good night, everyone.
Lost in the flame.